Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today with a man who I think more so than any guest I've ever had really needs no introduction. He is the man, he is the myth, he is the drive-in legend. He is Joe Bob Briggs. Joe Bob, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks. That's about the best introduction I've received in the last 10 years, so appreciate it.
Oh, well, I've been practicing the mirror all morning, so here's to hoping. All right, so obviously coming up on November 22nd, we have Dinners of Death, your second special on the Shudder streaming service. And just yesterday we had the first trailer drop for it. So anything you just want to tell us about, the general format of this program? Will it kind of follow the same patterns that you had for the previous show?
Yeah, well, we did the Friday the 13th marathon in the summer, and it wasn't really themed other than we just tried to mix it up with different movies, cult movies, so bad they're good movies, forgotten gems. We had a mixture of movies. So they wanted me to do two more marathons. They're mini marathons. It's just 4 movies. And the first one is at Thanksgiving, and it's called Dinners of Death, and it's movies that have a great dinner death scene in them. And so, including my favorite movie of all time. They don't like me to tell the titles, but it's got my favorite movie in it, which I've never hosted before because when I was at the movie channel and at TNT back in the 80s and 90s, this movie was on the Too Grisly for Cable list. It was actually banned from all TV, but even premium cable. So I was never able to screen it, but we're going to have it on Shudder at Thanksgiving. So, and once again, it's a live event. It starts at 9 o'clock Eastern time, and you have to show up for it. You can't stream it the next day. So we want people to stay up all night and party with us. We're calling it Black Thursday Dinners of Death. And because I talk so much, even though it's only 4 movies, because I talk so much, it'll probably go till dawn. We interrupt the movies for absolutely no reason. Because when they created this format, they wanted to copy the format from MonsterVision from years ago, where we had commercials, and so I would appear at every commercial break. And so I said, "You want to interrupt the movie even though there's no commercials?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, isn't that going to piss people off?" And they were like, "No, we think it'll work." And so we did it, for the marathon in the summer, and now we're going to do it again. Of course, the movies that are on Shudder. So if you want to watch them without my commentary, you could. So it's not so you do have that option. You don't have to listen to me, but that's the plan. Then we're going to do another mini marathon at Christmas. Called A Very Joe Bob Christmas on December 21st, which is the Friday before Christmas, which is on a Tuesday this year. And once again, 9 o'clock, dusk to dawn, 4 movies. Once again, they don't want me to tell the titles, so we have the two holiday shows. And then after the first of the year, we're going to start doing some weekly double features. So I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and as far as just the general structure of the upcoming specials, and we'll get a little bit more in depth about the weekly program towards the end of the interview. But do you have any special guests, mailbag sequences lined up, kind of following the same format as the last drive-in?
We do have some special guests. the audience is divided on guests. You know, some people like me to have the guests, and some people don't like me to have the guests. And so we have the occasional guest. You know, if I had my druthers, I'd have more guests actually. But we just have you know, we have one guest every fourth movie or something like that. You know, and they're very distinguished guests. But but a lot of people complain about the guest. You know, they want more commentary and less guest, and so we try to balance. And then other people love the guest. Like when I did the marathon this summer, we had Felissa Rose was on when we did Sleepaway Camp, and I loved the interview, and most people loved the interview. You know, and you know, so you know, we had a cryptozoologist on when we showed Legend of Boggy Creek. I thought he was really entertaining. I like to have guests, but sometimes the audience just wants me to talk, you know, straight to the camera.
And of course, you know, over the summer marathon, one of the big things that happened was sort of unplanned. There were some technical hiccups on the Shudder side. So for these upcoming specials, you know, what are they doing to sort of, you know, batten down the servers?
Well, we're making sure that, you know, the guy who runs the servers, you know, we run the servers on a Commodore 64, and we're making sure that he's sober and he doesn't spill any Dr. Pepper on the Commodore 64 while we're actually running the show. You know, I can't tell you what happened last time. I think it just the volume of people who wanted to see the show overwhelmed the servers, and so they not only shut down the servers for Shudder, but we shut down the servers for the Sundance channel too. So I don't know how they were connected, but they were connected. And so, but I think we're like we bought some more capacity or some more servers or something, and so we're ready for Thanksgiving. I hope. I was a little upset that when I did the show last time, I wanted everybody to see the first one and the last one. Those are the ones I worked hardest on, and that's when the system crashed. Nobody saw the first one. Nobody saw the last one. Fortunately, when the thing was over, Shudder decided they would just put them up on demand. Probably because people would have killed them if they didn't do that. Because people had set up viewing parties, and you know, we were getting all these emails and tweets and posts and, you know, Facebook stuff that you know, the fans were angry. I should say they were angry at first, and then they started celebrating the fact that they shut down Shudder.
And do you have any metrics on how successful the last drive-in was, like perhaps a number of viewers or an uptick in subscribers for the service?
No, they would never tell me that. I might ask them for more money if they tell me that. So I don't know what the metric. You know, they guard that stuff like you know, like the formula for Coke. They would never tell anybody how many people watch or anything like that. You know, these data streaming companies are all about, you know, who owns the data.
And do you think the suits at Shudder were surprised by just how successful the last drive-in was?
Oh yeah, they were definitely surprised. They told me they were surprised. When we announced it, when we announced we were going to do it, you know, one of the first people that posted about it, and he's helped me throughout my career, is Stephen King, and even the guys on Mystery Science Theater 3000, you know, posted nice things about, you know, the show coming back. I mean, it wasn't really the show coming back, but it was a similar format of the old show. And so there was a lot of love pouring out of the internet just when we announced the show, and so there was all that anticipation, and I think that's why, you know, the servers crashed. A lot of people had not heard of a lot of people that tuned in had not heard of Shudder before we announced this thing, and I mean, nobody was more surprised than me, because I was amazed that they wanted to do the old format. You know, I was skeptical about trying to bring back a format that was 20 years old, but apparently it's evergreen. Apparently, you know, that's the third time I've done a similar show, so so I guess that's the right formula.
And what was it like seeing?
You know, meaning there's the rant, the intro, the male girl, the interruption to talk about, you know, minutia and trivia regarding the film itself, and sort of, you know, generalizations about horror and all that stuff. And we put all that back into the show, and I actually enjoyed doing it. I didn't know if I would enjoy it or not, but I actually really did enjoy doing it. I really got into it.
Yeah, what was it like seeing the outpouring of support from some of your older fans? I mean, there were people literally in tears when the show was over.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, there are people who have been emailing me and who have stayed in touch with me for 30 years. I mean, the first time I was on the movie channel, I think, was in 1986. You know, and so so a lot of people have, and then of course I had people that knew my writing even before that, and so. So yeah, I was reconnecting with a lot of those people, but that was not the weird thing. The weird thing was the people who were not born when I first went on TV, who were yet familiar. They were familiar with the shows. They knew about the shows, and it's because so many of them were posted on YouTube, and so many people have watched all those old shows on YouTube, and I encourage people to post them on YouTube. I actually own many of the shows, most of the shows, and occasionally Showtime Networks or Time Warner will demand that they take them down, and I'll write a letter and tell them to put them back up because they don't really own them, and so. So anyway, there's all these shows that are online that younger people have seen who grew up in an era where there are no movie hosts, and so they were anxious to see the show because, you know, it was like sort of the return of the movie hosts thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously you've had a pervasive influence on, you know, modern day media, especially for millennials and Gen Z. You know, when you look at guys like James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, you know, someone very popular with a younger crowd who is directly influenced by your style. So do you think there was something about the Joe Bob character that just had such a, you know, ingrained, you know, appeal to the younger generation?
I don't know, really. I mean, I think one thing I think one advantage I had over almost anybody else that was on TV is that I was on late at night on a network that really didn't care about my show. They didn't really pay much attention to it. The high sheriffs that ran the network didn't really watch it, and they didn't care how long I went. So as long as I was done by 6 a.m., they didn't care. I could finish at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4:30. They didn't care. And so, so therefore, I didn't have any time limitations. I didn't really have any content restrictions. The only time I had content restrictions was if a bunch of people complained about some particular show and I would get in trouble. and then then I couldn't talk about that anymore, or something like that. But because that's the one time they would watch, they'd replay the tapes because because a bunch of people would write in. So, and so he'd say, well, he can't say that or whatever. And so, but in general, as long as I abided by they had a rule book of, there were certain words you couldn't say and certain subjects you couldn't approach. But other than that, they left me alone, and so the show was kind of freewheeling. And I think that's what people liked about it, is that it didn't start or end at any particular time. It didn't even have a regular start time, because often it would follow a basketball game or something, and so you never knew when it was going to come on. It could come on at 10 o'clock, 11:30, and then you didn't know how long it was going to last, because it would usually be a double feature, but the double feature could go, till 5 in the morning sometimes. And then occasionally we would have a marathon. We would do 4 movies, So I think the elastic nature of it was attractive to people. It wasn't normal TV.
Yeah, and there is a mystery that's been out there for a good 20 years now. There was one particular episode of MonsterVision where the entire opening monologue was censored from the airwaves. So, do you recall what that was about? What exactly irked the censors so much?
Well, I don't even know about this. There was a whole monologue that was taken off. That was taken off the air.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly which show, but
the only time I don't remember that. The only show that I remember was censored was actually not at TNT. It was at the Movie Channel, and it was our annual Christmas show. We would always do a Christmas show, and one year I wrote this sketch where all the major religions of the world come together at Christmas, and in a bar, and I'm the moderator. And so we had a Baptist preacher and a Jewish rabbi and a Unitarian female minister, and who was the fourth? Oh, and a Catholic priest. And there's and so we discuss the holiday season and how everybody needs to love one another. And then they get into a fist fight. All 4 of them get into a fist fight. And so, but the thing that sets off the fist fight and starts the argument is the Baptist preacher says to the rabbi, we love you even though you killed Jesus. We love you. And the Movie Channel said, you can't say that the Jews killed Jesus. And I said, well, we're not saying that the Jews killed Jesus. This idiot Baptist preacher, he doesn't know what he's talking about, says the Jews killed Jesus, but he still loves the Jews. And they said, no. You cannot do that kind of material. And we'd already filmed the thing. And they paid for us to go back and film it again without that line in it, and make it softer. That's the only time I can remember getting actually censored. They just been flat saying, we will not air that. We will not air the Baptist preacher saying that line. And so, but I don't remember. It's very possible that they didn't like a monologue and cut it out entirely, because you have to remember, I was doing 52 weeks a year for 16 years. It's so much material that I certainly didn't watch all of it, and I can't remember all of it, so.
And of course, from the past to the future, we do have a 2019 regular program on Shudder, so we're just going to try to glean as much information out of you as we can. So what should we expect when this weekly program starts hitting the internet next year?
It's similar to the it's similar to MonsterVision. They like me to do, the guys who produce the show, they like me to do 80s movies simply because there's a nostalgia for the 80s, and many people now call it the golden age of horror. I don't know if that's true or not. I never even heard that till recently. But they like me to do these old 80s movies, including 80s movies that I wasn't even aware that existed, you know? And I was trying to watch every single movie in the 80s. So, you know, they'll bring you these movies and say, dude, this is from 1987. I'll say, well, are you kidding? I said, I was going to every movie that came out in 1987. I've never heard of this. And they were like, oh yeah, had a theatrical release, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, maybe it had a theatrical release in, you know, Idaho, but it didn't have a theatrical release in Dallas, Texas, because I'm telling you, this movie was not in theaters. And I don't know where they find these things, you know, but they're digging these things up. They're coming out of nowhere. They all get released by Arrow Video. You know, Arrow Video will find these movies from the past and they'll call them forgotten gems. They never call them like movies that were too crappy to get distribution. You know, they're always forgotten gems from the 80s. And so we have those, and then we have I like weird foreign stuff. So so we have some Japanese horror. We have some Korean horror. We have some more recent recent films. We have really you know, bad but bad films that are fun for other reasons, you know. And so I guess you would call those cult films. Although to me, a cult film is a film like Basket Case, or a film like it's a film that has a following, but it has a cult following, but it's a good film. I don't know what you call this, you know, so bad they're good films, like Manos, The Hands of Fate, films like that. You know, it's like it's never going to be a good film. And you have to watch it with a certain mindset, or it'll be unbearable. But we do have a few of those, and I was skeptical about closing the marathon last summer with Pieces. Pieces is a horrible film, and I had not watched it since it first came out in theaters, and so I had to watch it again. And I said, well, it's still a horrible film, and but in the meantime, it's developed this cult audience that loves the fact that it's horrible. And so I said, I'm going to trust you guys that this will work. And sure enough, it worked. People did like it. A lot of times, the director of the show is a guy named Austin Jennings. He comes from MTV, and he was a fan of MonsterVision, and he remembers things about MonsterVision that I don't remember. he remembers episodes I don't remember. He remembers things I said that I don't remember. And so, in some cases, I take direction from him just because he says, "Oh yeah, you do this and it worked." And so I say, "Okay, I trust you, Austin. I'll go with it," you know. Or he'll say, "Millennials love this film," and I'll say, "Okay, well, I wouldn't know," you know. And he'll show me a film that I think is a mediocre film. You know, it's not a bad film, it's not a good film, it's a mediocre film from the 70s, from the 80s, sometimes from the 60s, and say, millennials love this film. And I'll say, okay, let's look at it again, let's reevaluate it, because a different generation than my generation likes the film, let's look at it, you know, let's see what we can say about it. So, I don't ever really alter my opinion, but I listen to other people who, you know, have a different take on why the film is good or bad.
Yeah, and considering, you know, Shudder is owned by AMC and they have a pretty wide, you know, reach there on cable, do you think there'll be any chance of perhaps some non-horror genre offerings being included in the program, sort of like a Joe Bob's Last Call equivalent?
Well, their definition of horror is pretty broad, and it includes thrillers. So yeah, we could show, something like Assault on Precinct 13, something like that. But we would not. I mean, they wouldn't show, just outright comedies on Shudder. I mean, when I first started doing late night shows for the movie channel, it was exploitation films. It was all kinds of exploitation films. It was action. It was sex comedies. It was those beach movies. It was every kind of exploitation title. This is a little bit more limited in that it has to have some horror element, but many action films have a horror element. Many thrillers have a horror element, and so I mean, where most of the horror films are on cable TV, they're on the Lifetime network. The Lifetime network, it's always about psychos. It's always psychological horror. It's about psycho women, usually. And so, cheap horror films are kind of dominated on TV by the Lifetime network. They probably have more in their library than Shudder has in its horror library. So yeah, there will be stuff that's not strictly horror. Especially some of the foreign stuff doesn't fit into what our categories are for horror, which is strange because if you ask those weird Japanese guys, where do you get your inspiration for these totally off-the-wall films? They always say, American horror. We grew up on American horror films. It's like, well, really? Did you watch them in reverse? Were you high when you watched them? Because you put stuff in these films that I've never seen before. So yeah, it's a big category. It's a big basket. The film that won the Academy Award is The Shape of Water is a monster movie. So the definition of horror these days is pretty broad.
And is there a window for when the expected debut date is for the new program?
I've heard March. I've heard beginning of March as when they want to pull the trigger on that. So that's what I expect it'll be.
Okay. And once again, obviously, Shudder is owned by AMC, one of the big cable networks. So, considering how successful The Last Drive-In was, and seeing how these upcoming specials and the program turn out, do you think there's a possibility you may actually come back to proper cable television for a new show?
I don't think so, because there's two different companies, and it's owned by AMC, but they don't really. I mean, it's considered a startup company. I mean, it's still a very small company compared to AMC, and it sort of has to make its own way. They don't get any breaks because they're owned by AMC. They have to. The head of the network is a guy named. I guess you can't call it a network anymore. The head of the streaming service is a guy named Craig Engler, who was at Sci-Fi Channel before he came to Shudder, and he's a horror producer. He produced Z Nation, if you know that show, and he's a it's all on him to find the formula that works for an all horror service.
And when you look at the history of exploitation film and horror in particular, you go through different distribution models and platforms. You went from grindhouses to VHS to now we're up to streaming. So what would you say is the contemporary analog to the exploitation or drive-in film?
Well, I think they're. I don't think the types of films that people make change that much. Exploitation films always just meant sex and violence that went beyond what they would show in the old days. It was beyond what it was something beyond what the studios would program. I mean, today the studios will commission virtually anything. So what it is it's a more extreme version of what the studios would do. And in the streaming world, it's a more extreme version of what Netflix or Amazon would do. So it's anybody who's a little bit of an outlaw. And it takes many different forms. I mean, we have a movie on Shudder now called The House of the Devil. It's made by Ty West, if you're familiar with Ty West's work.
Mm-hmm.
And he does movies that are probably not suitable for release in theaters, but they're powerful horror movies, and they're experimental. They're different. Some people call it slow horror. I don't call it slow horror because it has a big build-up. It doesn't have a kill scene every 5 minutes. It doesn't have a shock every 3 minutes. You know, it's very deliberate pacing, and it relies a great deal on the acting, on having great acting. And yet they're exploitation films. They have elements in them that are, that are obviously exploitative. And so he's a guy. I mean, the guy. Here's the thing: you can make one. In the old days, the exploitation guys were all in LA, and they would figure out what the studios wouldn't do, and then they would do it to be rebels, to be outlaws. Now you can be a rebel or outlaw, but you don't really have to go to LA. You don't have to go to New York. You can be in Kansas and do the same thing. The technology is cheap. All you have to be is talented and be able to execute the idea well. And you're the rebel, you're the outlaw. What we don't have is we don't have the big exploitation distributors anymore. We don't have the AIPs. We don't have the New World Pictures. We don't have the Sam Arkoffs and the Roger Cormans. We don't have those guys. We need those guys. We don't need so many writers and directors. There's thousands of writers and directors coming out of the film schools every year. We need more producers. We need more exploitation producers, guys who think of exploitation movies, who think of movies in an exploitation type way. I guess you could say Blumhouse is a little bit like that, but they seem to be more and more mainstream as time goes on. So I would say, exploitation movies haven't changed, but the number of people who want to make them is not as large as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Everybody goes for the home run now. They want the big Netflix series. And that's the other thing. Everything has become TV or streaming. That's where the big money is, as opposed to on the film side. The 2-hour film is a little bit, is like that's your third choice, is to do the 2-hour film. The last truly great horror film that I saw in a theater,
or any model. I'm always watching old films for the show, just last week on Halloween night, I presented the 1978 Halloween on Halloween night at the IFC Cinema in Greenwich Village, and that movie still holds up.
it has 2 or 3 big problems in it, and it has, and it's a little bit too simple. It's a little bit too simple. It could have twisted a couple of times, and it would have made me happier. But it still holds up as an extremely well executed movie. Partly because you have 2 amazing performances in it. You have the performance of Donald Pleasance and the performance of Jamie Lee Curtis, and you have that soundtrack. I think if you didn't have that musical soundtrack, the film would fail, or it would be mediocre. The musical cues kind of make the film. But that's the last film, because I had to rewatch it after I had not watched it since 1978. I was going to present it at IFC Cinema, and so I had to rewatch it. And so that's the last great horror film that I've watched.
And have you seen the 2018 version of Halloween?
I have not watched it yet. I've only watched the trailer because I usually wait till all the excitement dies down, and then I go to the Dollar House and watch it by myself.
And as far as one of the more recent horror films, I mean, has there been anything from the 2010s that's really just stood out to you as perhaps that decades-defining genre work?
From the 2010s? I'm going to give you some obvious examples. I really like Get Out because I think it took horror in a new direction. I don't really like the third act of the film. Once you get to the brain surgery part of the film, you know, there was better brain surgery in Blood-Sucking Freaks. I don't know what they were thinking when they did that whole thing, but up to that point, and even after that point, it's one of the truly original horror films of the last 20 years. And then you have, I thought the guy that directed it, and I'm blanking on his name, the Argentinian director who directed it, I thought he didn't get enough credit because that movie made $400 million worldwide, and it may have made more than that by now. And it's an all-child cast. He did an amazing job with an all-child cast. You know how hard that is? You know, that's like, I know he wasn't the director that everybody wanted, and that the production was troubled and all that. But I thought, all these guys, I'm sorry, but Greta Gerwig getting nominated for everything for Lady Bird, and then this guy gets nothing for this guy. He was just not recognized at all for that work that he did. That one sticks out in my mind. Last year was a great year for horror. I mean, Shape of Water, I'm not a huge fan of The Conjuring, but it brought back a lot of people to the horror, just because of its huge success with crossover people that don't watch horror every week like we do.
And one of the really interesting things I've observed lately about just the horror fan community is just the changing demographics. It seemed like if you went to a horror convention in 1998, it was 98% Caucasian male, the kind of guys that were metalheads that worked in metal shop. And now you go to a horror convention like Days of the Dead in Atlanta, and it looks pretty much like a Bernie Sanders rally. So what do you think
Really? Boy, that's interesting. In general, in the past, if you go to a sci-fi convention, a Star Trek convention, it's suburban. It's very suburban. It's very white. It's very suburban. It's very upper middle class. But if you go to a horror convention, it's bikers. You got a lot of tattoos. You got a lot of face metal. You got a lot of people who are misfits, rebels. People that don't go along with mainstream society. And I always liked that about it. I always thought, that's my audience. That's the people I want to be with. So the change that I see is you do have more people, coming in from Buckhead, okay? But it's still the people who think of themselves as outsiders, the people who live in Buckhead, but they don't really belong in Buckhead, And so it's still kind of a rebel crowd. I mean, it's still kind of a misfit crowd. It's not quite a punk crowd. It's not that far removed from mainstream culture. But it's but they tend to be people who go against the grain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and do you have any worries that perhaps there may be some more aggressive PC tops who might try to come after you from some of the things you said in the past, or God forbid they find an old MonsterVision clip of you wearing the dreaded Confederate flag jersey?
Well, that's already been up on the web many times, so I don't. I mean, the thing about my material is, people say, you can't say that because it's 2018. Well, you couldn't say that in 1982 either. I mean, it wasn't. It was never correct for me to say the things that I say in the way that I say them. But now people are more. I don't know what kind of wave of Puritanism wafted back over the country in the last few years, but we're regressing. I mean, we're going backwards from the freedoms that we established in the 60s, it's almost like Puritanism never dies. It's just part of our DNA, and I saw an article just last week praising the new Halloween for not having female nudity. Okay, and I was like, why is that a thing? Why is that a praiseworthy or why is that something to praise or condemn? It's just something that might exist and might not exist. Why are we having a conversation about that? That's the Puritan mind at work, and I hope we're not reverting to that again. When I first started, I've always been censored, and from the time I started, they would say, "Joe Bob, your material is offensive to older people. You got to tone it down." And now they come to me and they say, "Joe Bob, your material is offensive to younger people." Now that I'm older, Joe Bob, your material is offensive to younger people. You got to tone it down. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but when do I get to be pissed off? I think baby boomers are the only generation that thinks all things are permissible. And the generation before us and the generation after us are both censors. They have the minds of censors. I don't know why, but that's the times that we live in.
Yeah, and obviously there is Joe Bob Briggs, the late night cable TV host, but there's also Joe Bob Briggs, the writer. And a lot of people are saying that 2018 has been the year of Joe Bob Briggs, big comeback. But I would argue that actually started in 2016. We started writing for Takis Mag again. So anything you just want to say about your work there and some things you got coming up?
Do I have any what coming up?
Yeah, just some of any hot button issues you want to get into, or what it was like, perhaps maybe you've seen that Takis Magazine platform is sort of kind of helping you get back into the drive-in host formula.
Yeah, I mean, I know Takis, the owner of Takis Magazine, and the way I got involved with Takis Magazine was various friends of mine suggested that I write for them, and I wrote a few articles back for them maybe 10 years ago, and they never really paid enough for me to do it very regularly. And about 2 years ago, they appealed to me. They said, "Okay, we'll pay you what you want if you'll write for us every week." And so I started writing for them every week, and I kind of liked it because they totally don't censor anybody that works there. I've never been censored one time by them, and I've been censored by everybody now that ever worked for them my whole life. And so what I like about Taki is he's like, anything goes on in this publication, and that's how I ended up doing a weekly column for them, because it's a place of freedom. I mean, it's a little bit of a weird publication because it's published in London. Taki himself is a conservative Greek, well known in Europe, but not so well known over here. And most of their writers are Americans, but they're Americans that are on the fringes of something, and so I like that sort of like mix of I like the feeling of when you go there, it's like what is this? What can this possibly be? And it has a picture of a cocktail as their logo. It's like, what is this, a bunch of drugs? So you either love Takis Magazine or you hate it. I get mail saying, "Why? How can you be at that awful place?" I don't know. It's like I don't fraternize with everybody there, but they treat my column right. So that's been fun.
And of course, you can't talk about Joe Bob Briggs without talking about your other alter ego, Mr. John Bloom. And I think a lot of people, even some hardcore followers of MonsterVision and Drive-In, really aren't aware of your work as John Bloom. You had a great book recently come out, Eccentric Orbit. So do you have anything else coming down the pipeline under the Bloom umbrella?
Not really. I mean, the Shudder thing is taking up all my time right now. The main thing I would like to be moving towards is I want to produce movies. That's pretty much my goal. I don't really want to stay in front of the camera the rest of my life. I would rather be behind the camera. I would rather be mentoring young people as a producer, that's really where I want to go. As far as I want to produce exploitation movies, that's what I'm working towards. I'm working towards funding an actual, a small, low-budget film studio. So, I hope in the next year or so, that's what I'll be doing.
And do you ever have difficulty sort of aligning the two lives of Joe Bob and John Bloom? Like, have you ever had difficulties getting work because of the conflict between the two?
No, not really. I mean, it's a little. Some people find it a little weird if I'm, like you say, I did the book Eccentric Orbits, which is it's a very serious book about something that happened with satellites in the Clinton administration, and so sometimes it was never a problem before, but sometimes when I was interviewing, to do that book, I had to interview a lot of people at the Pentagon and former White House people and a lot of millionaires involved with that. And so before they agree to the interview, they Google me, and they say, "What is this? Why are you coming to see me? What are you going to do? Are you going to is this some kind of satirical thing? Are you going to make fun of me?" And I'm like, no. It's like, this has nothing to do with the drive-in movie critic part of my life. This is something. This is my original journalism career. I have to justify myself, or I won't do the interview. And so occasionally it has a conflict like that, but. Usually when people call me up and they want me to work for them, they want Joe Bob. They don't want John Bloom. So, and it's more fun to be Joe Bob than to be John Bloom. So that's mostly what I do now.
Hey, do you have any new books coming out or anything planned to look as far as, more journalism?
Well, my long-term book is I'm working on a history of the exploitation film, from the beginning of film to the present, and so that's what I hope to. That's the next book that I hope I can bring out. There's been some talk about reprinting my old review columns. I'll see if we do that. I don't know if I have the patience. It's going to take the patience of the world's most patient librarian to go and get all that stuff together, put it together and reprint it. But we may do that.
Yeah, and looking back on your writing career, what would you say has been, the best story or best feature you've ever done? The thing I'm most proud of, I look back on everything and I think, I can't read that. I could have done that better. I'm very hard on myself as a critic. But the one thing that I do like that I think we kind of nailed it is my writing partner Jim Atkinson and I did a book, and let's see, the book came out I think the book came out in '83 or '84. Called Evidence of Love. It's a true crime book. It was made into a TV movie starring Barbara Hershey, called The Killing in a Small Town. But that book is probably as near to that book is something that I wouldn't change. In fact, it wasn't even released on. It was not a success when it first came out, but over the years, it's got on a lot of top 10 lists in terms of top 10 true crime books. And about a year ago, they finally put it out on Kindle, on ebook. And so that would probably be the thing that I'm most proud of in terms of writing. In terms of TV, it would have been the show that we did. It would have been one of two shows. It would have been either the Friday the 13th marathon on MonsterVision, or we did a presentation of the Warriors, and that was one of my favorite monologues and my favorite running commentaries of all the ones that we did. I had a subway map and I showed where the Warriors were all through the season. And I don't know, for some reason that one sticks with me as one that we did really well. And just to wrap up here, we'll get you out in about 4 or 5 minutes here. There was a 17-18 year gap in between MonsterVision and the last drive-in. So how close did we get to anything else coming to fruition as far as a MonsterVision successor? I knew you were talking with, was it CMT for a while about a show? You mean how many shows did I try to do in those years? Yeah, what were some of the things that, were at least talked about in between?
Well, there really wasn't anything. I mean, about once a year, somebody would come to me, either a network or a producer or an agent or a manager or somebody would come to me and say, do you want to do a new show? And I would say yes. I would always say yes. And I'd say, okay, I want to pitch it to this guy, and we're going to do it, and blah, blah, blah. And I would never hear from them again. and so there were a lot of people who wanted to do another, either a hosting show or some other kind of show. In the meantime, I was developing. I did a lot of live stage work, so people would see a show I did on stage, and they would want to do it for TV, and they would come to me and say, "You want to do this for TV?" I'd say, "Sure." I'd never hear from them again, and so that's why I was skeptical about the marathon, because history was kind of repeating itself, because these two guys came to me and they said, you want to do this show on Shudder? Yeah. And then right before we were supposed to do it, the budget got slashed to nothing. And we were actually going to walk away and not do it. And the producer called me and he said, a lot of the people that were signed up to work on this have said that if we don't have the money for it, they'll still work on it. They'll work on it for free. I said, oh my God. I said, well, then I got to do it now. I got to do it, So we did it, with virtually no money. But I guess my point is, I had a lot of people wanted to do it, but they just disappeared. They couldn't do it. They obviously couldn't get it. Couldn't get anybody to buy it. So and now everybody wants to see my one-man show. so I'm doing the one-man show a lot. The one-man show is called How Rednecks Saved Hollywood, and it's a 500-year history of the redneck, told as seen through cinema, told through 200 clips and stills in a running commentary that lasts under 2 hours. So it's a comedy history it's a comedy cinematic history of the redneck. You just have to see it. I can't describe it. It's a multimedia stand-up comedy. It's a whole thing. It's a whole theatrical experience. So I can't really describe it. But I'm doing it at various locations around. I'm doing it actually this weekend. Saturday night and Sunday afternoon. I'm doing it at the Denver Film Festival. So I get that plug in. So, and then later this month, I'm doing it at the Parkway Theater in Minneapolis. And then next month, I'm doing it at the Alamo Draft House in Richardson, Texas. So I'm doing that show a lot. And people have talked about turning that into a series because it's got a lot of material in it. But I don't know that I want to do that. I kind of like having it be a live show that you have to show up to see it.
All right, and lastly, just to wrap things up here, when you look at your entire career as John Bloom, JOE Bob Briggs, I mean, what would you say has just been the defining moment of your career? I mean, what's the one standout memory or moment you've had over the last, 35, 40 years of doing this character?
The standout moment? Whoa. You mean like a good feeling moment? I don't know. It's like I'm always just focused on the next thing. The only time I look backwards is when I do these interviews. I'm trying to think, probably, you always remember the bad things that happen to you. And the very first show I ever did was in Berea, Ohio. It's a suburb of Cleveland. Because this promoter invited me to come do a show there. And so the very first time I ever did stand-up or did any kind of stage work there, the very first time I sang on stage, all that stuff, it was at this theater in Cleveland. And I thought, and the reason I did it is because I thought, I don't know anybody in Cleveland. I can sneak in there and do it. If I bomb, no one will ever know. And so I show up in Cleveland. It's on the front entertainment page of USA Today that I'm going to be in Cleveland that night. And so the thing was sold out. So the very first time I was on stage, it was for like 500 people, or no, it was more than that. It was like 800 people in the Berea Convention Center, which is the same as Berea High School. They have an auditorium there, and I was like not prepared because I didn't know how to prepare, and so I forgot my lines. And I had all these country western parody songs that I could sing. I had a band with me, and so when I forgot my lines, I would go to one of these country western songs, and they would bail me out, until I could remember where I was in the show, and then I would go back to the show. and it was really, really shaky. But at the end, I walked out the back of the theater, and the audience followed me into the lobby, and I did 20 more minutes in the lobby. That's how naive I was. I didn't know how to leave the stage. I didn't know where I was supposed to go. And so I went out into the lobby of the theater, got trapped by the audience, did 20 more minutes in the lobby. And so, well, even though it was kind of a bad show and it was shaky and it was weird, the people forgave me, and they were a wonderful audience, and they were warm, and they thanked me, and they lined up for autographs and everything. And so I thought, wow, if I can be that bad and the people still like me, then maybe if I really work on this, I can make it work. So I always remember those people in Berea, Ohio, because they knew what was going on. They knew that I didn't know what I was doing, and they stayed with me, and they didn't run me out of town. So that's one of my vivid memories of show business.
All right. Well, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure getting to speak to you today, Mr. Briggs. And just before we wrap up, I kind of debated whether or not I do this on air. I didn't want to go all fanboy on you, but I believe if someone has made a profound impact on your life, if you have a chance to tell them that, you need to tell them that. So I don't know if you've actually seen the comments on the Shudder YouTube channel for when The Last Drive-In was announced. Have you looked at the comments there?
No. The Shudder YouTube channel?
Yeah, for the original trailer for The Last Drive-In when it was first published.
No, I haven't seen that.
Well, anyway, if you go to it and you click on the top comment, you're going to find this really long, meandering screed from a YouTube user talking about, growing up in the South and having poor drunk parents and being ostracized at school, and how MonsterVision and watching your show got him through that. And it's got a couple of 300, 400 something likes, and I just want you to know that that person who wrote that comment was me. And
well, great. Well, I appreciate that. And believe me, I do read all those things when I'm aware of them. And so, thank you for writing that, and thank you for sharing that with me, because that's what it's all about, to try to create a community with these shows that we do. And there are other people who have told me similar stories, and I listen to every one, and they mean a lot to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, that you really introduced me to satire and using humor to tell a story. And I got to say, if it wasn't for MonsterVision and your columns, I don't think I ever would have been steered into a career in writing. And really, because of you and your work, it inspired me to go into a writing profession. And here I am today, 20 years down the line, an award-winning journalist, and even got my own, weekly Joe Bob Ripoff Drive interview column in the local newspaper. So I literally owe my career to you, Joe Bob.
Man. Terrific. Okay.
So I just want to take this time.
Hang in there. We need all the drive-in mutants we can get.
We certainly do. And I'll just let you wrap up the interview here. You can have the final word. You can say about anything you want. So go ahead, Joe Bob. The floor is yours.
I'll say what I always say, which is the drive-in will never die.
And I can't think of a better note to go out on than that. Mr. Briggs, it has been a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.